It's me, Hikiko, and welcome back to another SWERY Files, episode 4, The Good Life. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. It's going to be a long one, so make sure you get your stream snacks and your beverage of choice. I'm still trying to finish mine from last time. Tasty. Listen, I just want to be transparent and completely upfront. I did invest in The Good Life. Yes, I know. This may tarnish the rest of the review, knowing that information. There may be an element of bias here because I funded a grand total of 0.02%. I did the math. So, take what I'm about to say in this video with an extreme grain of rice. The Good Rice, available now! The Good Life, not to be confused with The Good Life or The Good Life, was a crowdfunded game brought to you by SWERY65's new studio, White Owls Incorporated. Did you play Deadly Premonition and D4? Well, this guy made them. Please give him money. It was also brought to you by Yukio Futatsugi. Did you play Panzer Dragoon and or Phantom Dust? This guy made them. Please give him money. According to SWERY, the idea for The Good Life was originally conceived back during Deadly Premonition's development, when a producer was transferred to England for an assignment. The producer told SWERY how miserable he was in England, and he detested the food, the weather, and he also hated how they spelled the word color. Okay, I made that last one up. Over time, the producer developed Salisbury syndrome, and he ended up falling in love with England, and he lived there for over 4 years. SWERY thought the producer's miserable fucking story would make for a great fucking game. So, SWERY went to the obscure crowdfunding platform Fig to raise some money. The pitch was for a game about a New York photographer named Naomi, who would travel to a small English town called Rainy Woods. I'm getting deja vu here. Somehow, Naomi would get wrapped up in a murder mystery. Oh, and one other thing, the town citizens would turn into cats and dogs sometimes.
People become what? The Good Life.
As you could imagine, SWERY had a ton of ideas for the project, including 2 separate versions, a cat version and a dog version. There would also be some online component between the versions, similar to how Pokemon would interact between versions. SWERY was talking about a giant open world RPG, real-time environments where all the NPCs would have their own schedules and routines, and a ton of different side jobs and mini-games for our protagonist to participate in, so she could make some money and pay off her massive debt. During the initial campaign, White Owls faced 2 major issues. Number 1, they had a difficult time boiling down SWERY's bizarre ideas into a pitch that could be understood. And number 2, no one wanted to use Fig. This looks neat, but nobody wants to use Fig. Next time, use a funding platform that people know about, not some random one where people don't know if it's shady or not. Finish D4 first. Complete one story at a time. Are you serious? Serious? The Good Life's Fig campaign fell short, only netting $682,864, which was 45% of the overall goal. This failure was the wake-up call SWERY needed to relaunch the campaign on Kickstarter, where the project underwent a major overhaul. The Good Life campaign was relaunched on Kickstarter in March of 2018, this time with a much more reasonable goal of $600,000 versus the $1.5 million they were seeking on Fig. They simplified matters more by reducing it to just one game. This time around, they had some very appealing backer tiers to incentivize people to fund the game. For example, if you paid enough money, you could have dinner with SWERY in real life. Or get this, you could have dinner with SWERY in the game. Shout out to Whitney Plays for this footage, thank you so much. And possibly the most interesting tier of all was the Tourist Life tier, where you could become an NPC in the game. Only one person claimed this tier, a person by the name of Kevin Clark, who could be seen running around the town of Rainy Woods wearing a backpack and flags from all over the world because he's a tourist. Just a warning here, this next segment's gonna get a little dark. I was curious to know who Kevin Clark was, just in case they were somebody famous or a game developer, and maybe I could go check out their games. Besides, they were the first person listed in the backer credits, so they spent over $10,000 to be in this game. I just wanted to know who it was. So I looked through social media and I couldn't find any trace of anyone claiming that they were the same Kevin Clark featured in The Good Life. But what I did find is a possible link to a Kevin Clark that was coincidentally the drummer in the movie The School of Rock, who was tragically killed last summer when he was out riding his bike and he was struck by a vehicle. In that scenario, that Kevin Clark would have never played The Good Life. So, as I said, nothing's been verified, but if you know that this Kevin Clark in the game is confirmed to be the Kevin Clark from The School of Rock or not, please leave a comment down below. This is the game's darkest mystery, and I hope it gets solved one day. Like the Fig campaign before it, the Kickstarter description made a lot of bold promises for intricate daily life systems, side jobs you could do to repay Naomi's debt, and the weird cat-dog mechanics of which now you could turn freely into a cat or a dog in this version of the game. Trust me, I will cover what actually made it in the final game once we get there. In a Reddit AMA given during the height of the campaign, SWERY also stated that he would release the unofficial story of D4 if they reached 10,000 backers. The campaign ended up making over $700,000 from 12,613 backers. Well, SWERY, we're waiting. I believe the campaign was a lot more successful this time around because it was focused and because they released a prototype demo of the game right before the campaign ended. Let's talk about it for a little bit. In an effort to give potential backers a taste of what to expect from The Good Life, White Owls released a prototype version on their Kickstarter page, which you can still download. I have to give them major credit. I've seen a lot of crowdfunded campaigns that did not even go this far to demonstrate what their game was all about. And ultimately, this was the deciding factor for me to throw my own money at the project. Granted, this did not provide any examples of the cat/dog gameplay mechanics, but the prototype was only made a couple of weeks before the campaign ended as a means to sell people on the idea. The look of the town was more bright and cartoonish. It was a stark contrast when compared against the final build of the game, which aimed for a more realistic and drab country town. Now maybe it comes down to personal preference, but I always prefer a stylistic approach over grounded in realism when it comes to video games. You don't see too many game studios going for the PlayStation 1 era as an inspiration, and keeping the low poly style would have been in theme with the game's time-displaced nature of Rainy Woods. If you're taking a trip to the primitive world, why not also keep a primitive style? The prototype is just a small cross-section of Rainy Woods comprised of just a few photography quests. In retrospect, the quests here were far more fluid than the final game, as Naomi could just take snapshots of the requested subjects and then return them to the quest giver without having to trek all the way back home to upload all of them to the internet. There were some creative ideas presented in the prototype that are nowhere to be found in the final game. For example, in the prototype, the first thing you might notice is this shiny red truck moving all around town. Well, in the final game, there is a red truck that appears in the prologue cutscene, but it never moves again beyond this cutscene. As a matter of fact, there are no moving vehicles at all in the final build of The Good Life, which makes it feel a lot more lifeless as a consequence. You see, there was a unique quest built around this red truck, which involved trying to snap a photo of the truck whilst it was in motion, but you can't get a clear snap of it while it's still moving. All of your photos would come out blurry, which prompted the player to think outside the box and drop an object within the truck's path to halt it so you could get a clear shot of it. This was a very clever puzzle that sadly the final game does not possess. The prototype also had better effects that did not carry carry over. For example, here you can see leaves blowing around in the gentle breeze. There was also an atmospheric use of volumetric lighting at night within the town, instead of the flat and dead street lamps present in the final build. Take a look at the placement of these lamps in the fog-covered woods. These were choices made to imbue a creepy, foreboding atmosphere, which gave the suggestion of a darker undercurrent to the happiest place on Earth. I left the prototype with the impression that SWERY would be throwing us a very gruesome twist hidden within a more mature take on Animal Crossing. It's safe to say that the prototype gives off a far different vibe than the final game we were given. It's sad to say, but the final game doesn't live up to the potential of the ideas presented in the prototype. Our story begins with the folklore of a cat and a man named Dick Whittington that may be tangentially related to the story, but not really. This never comes up again. The real story begins with a compressed, pre-rendered video clip of a red truck carrying sheep driving into the town of Rainy Woods. This compressed video clip is in every version of the game, including the PC one. I'm not sure why they couldn't just capture a higher quality version of this clip, but perhaps you could just chalk it up to the team at White Owls, signaling the kind of quality you can come to expect from The Good Life. We're introduced to our protagonist, Naomi Hayward, a hotshot photojournalist from New York who works for a company called Morning Bell.
What a goddamn hellhole.
She's massively in debt to the sum of 30 million British pounds for the reasons of I don't know and we're not given one. Regardless, she's come to Rainy Woods because she heard that there's a big secret about this town that would make for a very lucrative scoop. Unlike Agent York, she's less than thrilled about her trip to the primitive world.
Don't they have pest control around here? You got any idea how much these sunglasses cost? Goddamn hellhole.
She's greeted by the ambassador of Rainy Woods, Elizabeth Dickens, a wheelchair-bound woman that works for the town hall. The town is quite accommodating. Instead of providing the typical lodging situation, they straight up give Naomi a dumpy little home to call her own during her assignment. It's the very definition of a fixer-upper, but it provides you with the fundamentals of the gameplay. Starting off, her primary source of income is doing photo assignments for Morning Bell. Naomi has to take photos and upload them to a social media platform called Flamingo. It's basically a social media site like Instagram where people upload photos to accrue things called emojis, which are essentially likes. The goal here is to upload high-quality photos of interesting subjects to attract new followers and elicit them to leave emojis on the photos. The more emojis collected, the more followers Naomi can amass, and the more money her photos will generate over time. In order to maximize emojis, Naomi has to resort to chasing the trends. Every week, she's given a list of hashtag hot words, which are photo subjects that are trending right now on Flamingo. Essentially, you go out into the world snapping shots of hot words to then run back to Naomi's crack shack so she can upload them to Flamingo and passively generate some income over time. I appreciate how you start with this old tower PC with a CRT monitor that's outfitted with a blazing fast dial-up internet connection. This primitive station is where you're going to be undertaking most of the assignments in the game and uploading your photos very slowly. For a game with photography as the main core mechanic to make money, it seems rather limited in the type of lenses, film, or features that you can have for your camera. Using Gravity Rush 2 as an example, Kat could enter a tripod mode and freely place objects around, dress up in cool costumes, do poses, and choose from a variety of filters to jazz up her photos. After you took all your photos, you could upload them directly to social media using your PlayStation 4. My point being is that Gravity Rush 2 wasn't really about photography, yet it had more interesting ideas and features for photography than The Good Life, a game about photography. Granted, there are a few different different lenses Naomi can purchase, but they boil down to telephoto, wide angle, and standard lens. Occasionally, part of her camera will break after extended use, so you do have to run back to town and take it in for repairs. Later on, if you shell out a hefty sum, you can eventually get unbreakable camera gear. There are only two choices for filters: low resolution black and white or low resolution color. That's as creative as it gets. There were plans for a high definition camera that can be found in the game's code, but it never made it to the final product. You are stuck with pixelated out of focus shots for the entire game. Hooray! If we look back at the Fig campaign, they promised a heck of a lot more features to the camera, such as blur reducer, super sensitive lens, rapid fire shutter, high speed shutter, flash, autofocus speed, follow-up autofocus, stationary motion shutter cameras, and drones. None of those features made it in. Despite being rather bare bones, the photography quests are some of the most fun that the game provides, but they are nowhere near as creative as the ones presented in the prototype. You rarely do things to interact with your subjects to get the desired shot, like you did with the truck in the prototype, and I feel the half-assed nature of the photography system is a giant missed opportunity, considering that SWERY games are known for being jam-packed with little details that draw you into the world and its story. It's sad to admit, but the power of observation isn't really at play in The Good Life. Taking a look around at your environment rarely uncovers the greater mystery at play, or gives the player much of a reason to go and seek out the little details in the first place, outside of just ticking a little box and collecting a monetary reward at the end of it.
Thanks, as always.
If you think back to Deadly Premonition, York had the ability to investigate all the finer details within the case as it was developing. You could observe items and hear his inner thoughts about what was going on. Or you could be a creep and look through windows to observe people in their natural habitat. Let's take a look at D4, Dark Dreams Don't Die. The power of observation and little details were at the forefront of telling this game's story. When you would observe the characters and the objects within the world, you would get multiple little details to clue you in on what David Young was thinking and the breadcrumbs that the writers were trying to clue you in on to lead you to the game's biggest mysteries.
A Nobel Prize for the first man who put cheese in a hamburger.
There's no great reward for paying close attention to what's going on within Rainy Woods. All the story you're going to ever get comes from doing the game's main quests. And the story you do get is a slap in the face and a middle finger to the player for even trying to get invested in the first place. Okay, back to the story. Naomi runs into Elizabeth, who warns her not to go out at night, but the quest demands it, so we gotta do it. Naomi walks into the town square at night, and she quickly learns about the town's biggest secret: the citizens of Rainy Woods turn into cats and dogs during a full moon.
No way. Is this the town's big secret?
Why they do this? Well, that's the biggest question that I'm sure the game will answer for us eventually, right? No time to interrogate all these animals. Elizabeth wheels off and you have to give chase until the game unnaturally transitions into a rainy and foggy environment, as if somebody was playing Grand Theft Auto 3 and accidentally entered the rain cheat code. Naomi stumbles upon a small cabin in the woods that belongs to the groovy witch Pauline Atwood. After just meeting her, Pauline convinces Naomi to make some backwoods hooch and then sends her off on a material fetch quest to craft this strange brew. Now, if you're excited for the prospect of go here, collect thing, return to quest giver, then you're in for a real treat with The Good Life. After returning with all the ingredients, Naomi gets fated on this catnip juice and is spirited away to this alternate cat dimension where she inherits the ability to turn into a cat. We have now reached peak SWERY. The narrator prompts Naomi to use her newfound cat powers to climb the church's bell tower to then investigate the glowing thing. Here you'll learn the basics of the cat form. The cat can jump high and scale certain walls if there's a scratch mark on it. That's the gist of it. Inside the bell tower, Naomi discovers a glowing statue that we come to find is the goddess of Britannia, and don't worry about remembering this critical plot point. It's buried within the context of an email in case you were wondering and appears nowhere else in the game. Then she passes out and then wakes up in a field, and then the statue crumbles into dust. Sepia cutscene where Pauline tells Naomi the whole cat dog thing is part of her imagination. Gaslight, bitch. Then the title card. I've played this game for over 100 hours, and I still can't tell you why any of these things happen and their bearing on the overall story. Cartoon break. We get a story about how Charles II loved dogs. Once again, no bearing on the plot, just a story tangentially related to England and dogs.
Charles II is said to have loved dogs.
Naomi begins to suspect that Elizabeth is hiding the town's secrets from her, but before she can learn anything important, we're given a crafting quest at McAvoy's Construction, which is run by an actual knight, Douglas McAvoy. It wouldn't be a SWERY game without a town eccentric. You're told to go out and grind for some materials, which involves turning into a cat and then hunting some wild animals. This is the Good Life's idea of hunting. It boils down to locking on an enemy and hitting a button to auto-attack them. The Good Life is one of the best examples of artificially padding out a game with low drop rates on mission-critical materials. The game never justifies the grind or offers any significant rewards for your trouble. Most of the game time is spent running around the map with your fingers crossed, praying that RN Jesus will take mercy on you. Fuck you, child. What was the purpose of this quest? Oh yeah, to craft running shoes for Elizabeth. Running shoes for Elizabeth. SWERY, you coy son of a biscuit. Elizabeth tells Naomi to rendezvous with her at the town square at night, where she will share all of the town's secrets. Oh yeah, this is legit. Once again, Naomi finds herself playing a game of Midnight Cripple Chase until she's ambushed by a wild badger.
Okay, you're not the type for talking things through.
This kind of shit is par for the course when it comes to plot development in The Good Life. You'll be hooked into the mystery, and then when you're just about to unravel the truth, a time-wasting rug pull comes along to bring the story to a dead stop. You're given the wheel around so many times that you'll start to forget what the heck you were doing before you got sidetracked. Even more so if you choose to pursue any of the 100+ side quests. In one of the main story branches, you meet William Dickens, a narcissistic writer that tasks you with retrieving a golden egg omelet. So you run around, collect some golden eggs, craft the omelet, and then Naomi savagely eats the omelet with her bare hands. Plot twist, now she dog.
What?
Man, this is so quirky and cool. Jank. Cool. Weird. Quirky. Wowee. By now, you should let go of expecting any sort of explanation for why the things happen in the plot because you're never gonna get one. That's just the way it is in The Good Life, and if you don't appreciate it for being unique and different and strange, then you're clearly the problem and not the story. Did you think about that? As a dog, you can now assign a scent to help you track down people. See these stink clouds? Come get a whiff of this gameplay. I assure you, there's more where that came from. The dog is also a better fighter than the cat form. It offers higher offense and defense, but there's no lock-on or Z-targeting. Fighting in the game is just a miserable time of trading hits and praying, and the penalty for dying is half of your money. Good luck. Possibly the worst decision made is how they handled Naomi's transformation between dog and cat form. Naomi has the ability to switch between animals at any given time, which defies the full moon rule that governs the townsfolk of Rainy Woods. Okay, whatever. When you transform, the entire screen flashes bright white. If you want to transform back, bright white screen. By the end of the game, you will have been exposed to this bright white screen at least 1,000 times. This wouldn't have been so bad if they had just made transformations instantaneous like what was advertised in the Kickstarter, where Naomi would just poof into the desired form, but no. I guess that idea was too in service of the player's eyes. The plot picks back up when Naomi comes across Elizabeth's tipped over wheelchair and a set of glowing footprints leading to the river. Naomi follows them only to make the startling discovery that Elizabeth was murdered.
This can't be happening. This is why I hate this shitty countryside. Happiest town in the world, my ass.
Remember how atmospheric the woods looked in the prototype, with all these little lanterns and fog and blades of grass blowing in the breeze and the mysterious music leading up to the reveal of Elizabeth's corpse? None of those elements are present in the final game. Way to fuck it up, boys. Whatever, dude. I was just still holding out for the signature sweary twist that's gonna surely come in the third act. I mean, could there still be a darker element at play in the happiest town on Earth? Taper those expectations, Deadly Premonition fans. We're in the T for teen realm. Elizabeth's murder becomes the new focal point of the investigation, and now you have a few leads to follow. You're given 3 separate routes to choose from: Route A, B, or C. The narrator suggests doing them in whatever order you please.
You might think it best to tackle these in order. A, B, C, you know? But it's no skin off my nose which order you do them in. Follow your instincts if you want.
Besides, giving the player some agency in an RPG is never a bad thing, unless you're playing the good life. More on that in a minute. Outside, Naomi is ambushed by Daniel Miller, aka Lobster Guy. Lobster! He's a photojournalist from Boston that acts as Naomi's rival, but he pretty much just exists to show up at odd times and talk some shit. Daniel here was supposed to be an active rival within the gameplay, and depending on your choices within the investigation, he could potentially steal scoops away from Naomi. So depending on which way you choose to pay off the debt, you might only interact with certain NPCs. You might not even ever see certain characters, right? For example, with the New York Publishing Company mission I mentioned, if you were to ignore that mission, Naomi's rival will find out about it, take those pictures, and turn them in instead. So you would be unable to complete that mission. This is something I haven't told anyone yet, but that never happens. Daniel is a cutscene only character that does not interact with you or the citizens of Rainy Woods in any way, much like our next character. We are also introduced to Hugh Lee, a debt collector that's always watching over Naomi, which reminds us of the greater goal of paying down the £30 million debt. Don't expect him to try and shake down Naomi for more cash during the game. He just appears during the epilogues of story quests and then just flies away. Okay, that's the setup to the game's story. Were you able to follow along at home? No? Aw, man, that's a shame. You're really missing out on this engaging plot, and if you ask me, Swery really gave it a try here. There was some participation going on. I think it might be a little too early in the plot to throw an analysis down, but I'm gonna go ahead and do one. You see, the good life is all about be careful how you spend your money, because you might actually get something bad in return. It's hard to nail down just one aspect of the good life that ruins the entire experience. It's one of the most tedious and frustrating games I've ever played, and that is saying something coming from me. Still, I think this was by Swery's design. He wanted to illustrate his point about how miserable it must be to take a vacation in rural Britain. Well, point proven. I'm never gonna go vacationing there. Thank you for the warning, Swery. Even still, a new mechanic doesn't necessarily make it a good one, or a fun one, or a worthwhile one. And all the mechanics that were left over from the initial Kickstarter, well, They don't do anything to serve the player's overall exploration in the world of Rainy Woods. Only hamper it, only slow down the exploration to prevent them from getting to the finish line. Let me explain what I mean. Buckle up, we're in for a long one. Traveling around the world of The Good Life is cumbersome and tedious, to the point where the average player would drop the game and never look back. And that's exactly what happened here. Now you could argue that's kind of the point. The choice was by design to make progress a gradual thing, with many layers to unwrap as a means of slowing the player down to encourage them to play the game at a leisurely pace, take in all the sights and sounds, and then eventually drip feed the player little tools that will gradually streamline the game, without completely giving them everything all at once. It's more about the journey and less about the destination. Too long didn't listen, Death Stranding. Well, if that was the plan, it failed in execution, and here's why. Now, I usually look forward to the convoluted systems in SWERY games as they tether the protagonist to human routine. If you've played Deadly Premonition, you'll have come to know that eating, sleeping, and freshening up are all semi-important factors to consider if you want to survive the horror of the mundane world of Greenvale. The Good Life has expanded upon these hygienic routines to an absurd degree. Let me take a crack at explaining all of this madness in the UI. Up top is the cat/dog affinity meter. If you do quests for cat people, it raises the points you have on Team Cat. The same also applies to the dog side of the meter. Your team affinity will give you discounts in the stores if you're a part of that particular person's team. Your affiliation near the end of the game will alter one quest. Naomi's portrait here is also a meter. This gauges her stress level. Stress is gained when Naomi gets hungry or does something like fast traveling back to her home from the world map. If she gains enough stress, she'll get a headache, which halves her consciousness, putting her at risk for passing out. Well, how do you reduce stress? It's a SWERY game. You go out drinking.
Naomi, what are you doing?
Down here is the healthiness bar, not to be confused with the vitality bar. They're separate things. Healthiness is the most annoying mechanic, as it leaves Naomi susceptible to 3 different status effects: colds, toothaches, and lumbago. I'm just gonna cover the colds. If Naomi has low healthiness and you're outside during a rainy day, which is all too common considering you're in the goddamn hellhole known as Rainy Woods, you will catch a cold, which is the worst status effect in the game. Catching a cold takes Naomi's stamina and cuts it in half, which takes running out of the equation and slows the game down to a crawl. The only way to cure a cold is by keeping medicine on hand or getting expensive treatment from the vet. It can really hamper your exploration if you catch a cold without any medicine on hand. You have to drop everything and go back to town just so you can get rid of this annoying status effect. The stomach here represents Naomi's hunger bar, and you can satiate her appetite by cooking at one of the game's many kitchens or by visiting a restaurant. I have no problem with this status bar because it encourages the player to learn about Rainy Woods' culture by trying out the local cuisine of things like this stargazy pie where all these fish heads are poking out looking at you. Eating food also works kind of like Monster Hunter, where you get additional perks like bigger stamina, less hunger, more attack power, that sort of thing. These red boxes here are Naomi's vitality bar. Now, if she loses all of them, she gets knocked out and warped back to the veterinary clinic, which comes with a huge monetary penalty of losing half of the funds in your wallet. Oftentimes, you'll be out in the wild exploring and you'll get ambushed by a badger or some other wild animal, and then you're forced to engage in the game's terrible combat. More often than not, you'll find yourself with an unexpected death on your hands, and half of your money in your wallet is gone.
Damn, you!
For a game that doesn't provide you with many opportunities to earn money, this can dramatically alter your progress. So I recommend traveling lightly and dumping all your money in the ATM, because the game doesn't tell you this, but if you have no money in your wallet, when you get a game over, you get medical treatment for free. I tried this trick out in the real life to mixed results. The green bar here is Naomi's awakeness/consciousness meter. If it's depleted, Naomi will pass out on the spot and it's game over. This encourages you to either slam energy drinks to continue on or to take frequent naps to stave it off. And finally, there are two passive statuses without meters. There's hygiene, which degrades over time, causing Naomi to become stinky, which lowers your other hidden stat, charisma. Now, if Naomi doesn't adhere to the ritual of regular bathing and beauty care, the people of Rainy Woods will begin to resent her very presence, make remarks about how stinky she is, and they start to increase all the prices in the shop. A good way to know how clean Naomi is based on the visual indicators of sparkling for max clean, or flies for max stinkiness. It's a carryover from Deadly Premonition. Believe it or not, at one point during the development, SWERY had planned to incorporate a menstrual cycle for Naomi, requiring her to purchase tampons. So if it was a guy, it'd be every time he got an erection, lol. No, I didn't add Naomi's menstrual cycle into the game so that it would become a joke like that. It's there for a secret special reason. Also, erections are completely different from monthly menstrual cycles. For the record, I think these are all great ideas on paper, and the tampon thing should have stayed in, but ultimately, they do not work here to benefit the game in a humorous or enjoyable way as they did in Deadly Premonition. For example, there was a passive beard growing system running in the background of DP. It didn't alter the gameplay in a beneficial or detrimental way, it was purely just for fun. The systems in The Good Life, however, are more of a hindrance to progress versus a quirky set of daily life tasks. Now, I never thought I would say something like this, but The Good Life starts off on the wrong foot by letting go of the player's hand far too early, and as a consequence, it allows them to waste an untold amount of time before they ever come across a more efficient way to travel around the world. Let's rewind. Remember this moment where the player is presented 3 different story routes and a handful of side quests all at once. The narrator even encourages you to play the game however you want. Just go off, Queen, choose your own adventure.
You might think it best to tackle these in order, A, B, C, you know? But it's no skin off my nose which order you do them in. Follow your instincts if you want.
This is a major problem. If you're like me, you have probably played many RPGs over the years, and that's ingrained a sense of apprehension for jumping into the main quest without having first finished all of the side stuff, out of the fear of potentially being locked out or missing content through the act of progressing the main storyline. By the way, you can get locked out of side quests if you progress the main storyline, so it's a real concern. So naturally, you're gonna go and do all the side stuff you can before pressing forward into the main quest. Or perhaps you made the decision to pursue Route B or C instead of Route A, under the pretense that it would alter the storyline in some meaningful way. You'd be wrong for thinking so. Now, if you choose to do anything but Route A, you will forego the only vehicle in the game, the Steed.
Steed. What a horse's arse of a name.
Clearly, you're not a racing man, Sir August.
I spent over 20 hours of the game grinding through monotonous side quests on foot, dealing with the very limited movement because of the constant colds, lowering the stamina bar, before I got so frustrated I stopped caring and just decided to push through Route A, where I unlocked the Steed, and it cut my travel time in half. Good job, SWERY. Thanks for cutting me loose in your open world without a vehicle. This agency is so liberating. Remember how Deadly Premonition started? York exits the lodge and he gets keys to a vehicle.
So we have King George to thank for preparing a car for me. A pleasant surprise, eh, Zach? Let's take it for a spin.
They set you up with tools you needed to efficiently explore the vast world of Greenvale and then let you loose? Granted, this car is a piece of shit and becomes obsolete when you unlock the fast travel, but at least it was something. What about Deadly Premonition 2? The opening scene in Lucare.
And in its place, they left me this.
What?
A skateboard.
A skateboard?
Same story as before. You have the means to get around the open world whilst foregoing the limitations presented by the stamina meter. In both of these examples of SWERY's past open world games, the player was given a mandatory vehicle in an unmissable fashion before letting go of the player's hand into said open world. The principle of starting out the player with their primary mode of transport as soon as possible within the context of an open world RPG environment seems like fundamental shit that should have been considered before releasing this title. As a director, you have to assume that your player base has had some exposure to other open world games, and if you pull a dirty trick like this by hiding the vehicle behind a main story quest after encouraging the players through the dialogue to play the main quest out of sequence or to go pursue the side quests, you've essentially fucked them out of their precious gaming time for no good reason. As an unfortunate consequence of hiding the sheep behind a story mission, most of the players on Xbox Live who played it through Game Pass, because that's the free version, dropped the game before ever riding the sheep. Only 16% of players got this achievement. The drop-off is also quite significant for both the PS4 and the PC versions, respectively. What were you thinking, man? Even after you acquire a sheep in The Good Life, it still doesn't fix all of your traveling woes. Let me explain why. The biggest issue I have with them is that they cannot jump, and that omission alone makes getting around more annoying than it really needed to be. To get over one of the game's hundreds of walls, you have to stop, dismount the steed, transform into a cat, jump over the wall, transform back into Naomi, then whistle for the steed, and then remount the steed to continue on with your traveling. It's as painful as it looks.
自転車はダメです。羊に乗りますって言って僕は羊にしましたね。
Yeah, so after you clear a certain route in the main quest, you'll be able to ride a sheep. And when they were first developing the game, the staff members said, maybe we should put a bicycle in this game. But Sawyer said, no bicycle, you're gonna ride a sheep.
The steed is capable of boosting, which allows them to break through boxes and barrels. Doing this taps into both your stamina bar and your patience. Naomi will shout, "Yeah, baby," every time you hit the boost button.
Yeah, baby! Yeah, baby!
No, they didn't record any alternate lines. You're gonna hear "yeah, baby" about 600 times throughout the game before you're done with it. I know SWERY likes to run his movie references into the ground, but this is absurd.
Yeah, baby, yeah!
Speaking as a backer now, it seems as if the sheep we were presented in the Kickstarter were far more dynamic and aesthetically pleasing than the lifeless and boring Unity boxes that you can ride in the final build. Let's take a look back at the Kickstarter sheep. They're white and fluffy, and they seem to have some sort of behavior patterns, like when they crowd around Naomi here in this video clip. It also seems that you could have herded them at one point, but for some reason, they're all lobotomized within the final build. They also cut out the sheep shearing minigame, which was another way to earn some much needed money and cut up the monotony of the game. Don't get me wrong, there is still sheep shearing going on, but instead of a minigame, it is now a contextual menu where you have to go up to each individual sheep once a week, click a box, and then it shears the sheep for you. Ah, yeah, this is much better. this time around, there's no radar to pinpoint where the citizens of Rainy Woods are in the world. Considering that Deadly Premonition implemented a people radar, where you could get a general idea of where the people were on the map, it's a wonder why The Good Life didn't implement something similar. Instead, they came up with a much more frustrating solution for this problem. The developers expect you to rummage around through the garbage bins to find a randomly dropped item that contains the person you're trying to track scent. Then you have to dip into your menu, assign the item to scent tracking, and then you just start sniffing all these fart clouds on the ground wildly, hoping that you pick up the trail of your targeted person. Was there no better way to do this? You're gonna have to take mental notes of where you last saw something, as the map you're given is one low-quality blurry JPEG with no legend to inform you of where the things are in the world. There's no ability to set waypoints because that feature might provide relief to the player, so they had to cut it. Thankfully, there are these cat dog shrines scattered across the map, and they allow you to teleport to another shrine as long as you've unlocked it, but you have to pay a small fee every time you use it. If it weren't for these shrines, I would have quit the game straight up. Ultimately, there's no reason to go outside of Rainy Woods. Most of the characters hang out there as it is, and if you do choose to visit the couple of towns on the far reaches of the map, you'll come to discover that they're filled with generic NPCs that don't give you side quests or have any bearing on the story. The best way I could describe this place: really creepy and unnecessary. What else is there to say? I really despise the implementation of the crafting system. It's clear that this was put into place to pad out the dead open world with stuff to collect, rather than interesting activities to do within said dead open world. If you want a new article of clothing, be prepared to spend at least an hour or so hunting down all the individual materials to craft it. It was a lot simpler in the Kickstarter campaign, where you could just buy clothes with money. Managing all the materials is a pain in the ass. If you want to carry more materials on Naomi, you have to craft a backpack, which in itself will take hours out of your life to get the necessary materials to craft it. Naomi can also store extra materials in the shed at home, but be warned, you cannot dump all your materials in just one solid batch. You have to press a button once per item, meaning you'll have to tap the button hundreds of times to dump each individual item one by one. What the fuck? For a game that advertised itself as a debt repayment RPG, your money has no power here. The tagline for The Good Life was Debt Repayment Daily Life RPG.
こんにちは。ホワイトアウルズのスウェリーです。今回、イギリスの田舎町を舞台にした借金返済 RPG.
Perhaps that tag strikes a familiar chord with anyone who has played Animal Crossing. In Animal Crossing, you play a character that moves to a new town and takes out a predatory mortgage. And then you participate in a variety of odd jobs to earn money so you can pay down your debt. Then, you do it all again when the time comes to upgrade. The fun comes in from the variety of avenues to gain money, the different relationships you build with the people in the town, the various seasons and events you can participate in, and the agency you eventually earn over your town and homestead. Animal Crossing is a wildly popular game for a reason. There's a lot of content and customization to keep you coming back for more. And if you're going to create your own game that has debt repayment as a central game mechanic, it's a great formula to copy. However, it seemed like the team at White Owls did not want to invite the comparison to Animal Crossing. They went out of their way to differentiate The Good Life from it in the description of their game on the Kickstarter. What do you think when you hear the word countryside? Gathering bugs and fruit? No, we're tired of all that. They continued on by making additional promises of new, exciting, original ways to earn money that would be featured in The Good Life and nowhere else. Shear sheep, deliver milk, make jam and hay, do some gardening, or work as a bartender, a casino dealer, a miner, or even mine for cryptocurrency if you want to. In a Reddit AMA, Swery was asked about the whole crypto mining thing, and in his reply, he spared no opportunity to trash on Animal Crossing. Hi Swery, one thing I'm curious about, apparently mining cryptocurrency is a way to make money in the good life. Any particular reason why that was included? I put that in as a joke, but I want to have a part-time job similar to FX trading or something, because I think pulling fruit off trees and selling them is stupid. I guess we're gonna ignore the fact that we can sell fruits and vegetables in the good life. Regardless, the crypto mining job was never added to the game, and that was my most anticipated feature. Out of the 9 promised jobs in the Kickstarter description, only 3 made it in: sheep shearing, gardening, and mining. Sheep shearing, if you could really call it that, was watered down to clicking a menu and Naomi would automatically shear the sheep. This was a huge digression from the mini game that was shown off on their official YouTube page. Gardening is the most basic system in the game. You literally just plant a seed you find, wait a couple of days, and then you harvest. There's no special tools, fertilizer, watering, or any crossbreeding going on. It's also a terrible way to earn money. You're better off just saving all the stuff you harvest for the game's tedious crafting system. And then there's mining, which requires you to purchase 1 pickaxe from Douglas. This pickaxe will never break. You just go to one of the few mines in the game, press a button on a mining icon, and Naomi will dig out an ore. Sometimes you'll get a diamond, which is a decent way to get a little chunk of change. But once again, if you look back at the Kickstarter footage, you'll notice that mining was going to be a full-blown minigame from inside actual caves. Naomi even sported a spelunker's helmet. It's another case of here's the expectation and here's the reality. There were also going to be unique minigames that you could play as the cat or the dog. Are there minigames that you can only play as a cat or dog? Yes, there are. Cat-only minigames include cat boxing and cat massage. Dog-only minigames include dog rugby and frisbee catch. Once further, these do not exist. This is an open-world game centered around a rural English town. Naturally, time and seasons will run on their own in-game clock. There will be special photos that you can only take in certain seasons, which can be sold for lots of money. And we want traditional English events to appear in their proper seasons. Of course, classic events such as Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, and Easter are being considered. While the game does have a weather system that's comprised of rainy, cloudy, or bright blue skies, there are no other seasons to be found. There's not even a calendar to keep track of what month you're in. White Owls also advertised a fishing system as a way to earn money. That did not make it in the final game. There's no denying it, the Kickstarter made a lot of promises for ways to earn a living within the good life, but failed to deliver on a majority of them. In my opinion, the most egregious omission was leaving out the multiple ways to pay down the debt, which was the entire advertised purpose for the game. Let me explain what I mean here. White Owls removed the open-ended ways to pay down Naomi's £30 million debt. At no point in the game can you put any money towards the principal amount. At no point does she have to pay interest or face any penalties for late payment. It just exists in the background of the story and has no bearing on the gameplay whatsoever. A portion of the £30 million debt is paid down automatically after each major story route is completed, of which there are only about 5 major quests to complete in the game. So after you finish the 6 hours of story mode, Naomi will be completely debt-free. Remember, this game was advertised as a debt repayment RPG, and SWERY himself went around pitching the game as having an open-ended way to pay down the debt. There's one really cool point about the good life. You can pay back the debt in different ways. You can get money through doing main missions, or you can get money through doing side jobs and taking pictures. There's a particular mission where you can receive a request from a New York publishing company to take certain pictures. You can get to the ending by just doing that alone. There's all kinds of different ways that you can get there.
So that was a fucking lie.
There's no other way to pay down the debt except for doing doing the main story quests. The entire campaign was built around a mechanic that does not exist in the final game. I wish I could say there was still some redeeming quality here, but honestly, there's no reason to get invested in this game. There isn't a payoff for your troubles in the literal or figurative sense. Just do the story quests if you care about the story, but there's absolutely no reason to take on the 100+ side quests. Most of the side quests can be boiled down into two categories: fetch me some materials, or go take a photo of this subject and then upload it to Flamingo. The rewards are never good. You only get around 50 pounds at best in exchange for hours of your life. And speaking as a person who did dump all those hours of their life into checking out the side quests to see if there was any major revelations or cool things to uncover, no. You want to see what the big major reward is for doing all the side quests in the game? I'm gonna spoil it right now. A statue of Naomi to go in your garden. This is it! No additional vehicles, no additional revelations in the story, just a fucking dumb statue. Thank you, SWERY. To top it all off, they did not even bother to provide the player with a stat screen to keep track of all the various data and progress you made in the game. I've probably put over 100 hours into The Good Life, but I have nothing to show for it. It would be interesting to know how much money I accrued overall, what my best times were for the sheep races, how many pints of beer I consumed over the multiple drinking competitions. It's like when casinos don't install any clocks in their gambling halls. Like, maybe White Owls is trying to keep you from realizing all the hours of your life you've wasted away in this goddamn hellhole. The outline for a debt repayment RPG already existed, and SWERY, a notable plagiarist, could have copied the fundamentals of Animal Crossing, but no, had to be different, had to make all these promises that his ass couldn't cash, and to put it bluntly, The Good Life squandered the potential of this concept in the most pitiful fashion. It was built on a lie, and what remains is awful. Before I wrap this up, I'm gonna run through the story to the best of my ability. I'm trying to make sense of all this nonsense because it seems to me as if SWERY was lampooning the player from the beginning by introducing all these mysteries and then going ahead and just never solving them, and leaving the player out in the cold to run around aimlessly in a desperate panic trying to do all the side missions, like yours truly, hoping that there was some more clarification to be found. There wasn't, and here comes the spoiler segment for a game without a payoff to the ending. Please enjoy. Route A, Naomi talks to this magic sheep guy who tells of some old castle where there's a possible treasure. She rides the magic sheep guy across the space-time barrier into the old castle. There she attends a party of the ancestors of the citizens of Rainy Woods. The only important thing she learns here is where the treasure is. It's in the cellar of the castle. There she finds barrels of a rare alcohol called Vampire's Blood. And before she can take one, she has to win a Drain Queen contest against the town's Vicar. She wins, she takes a barrel, and then hands it off to Morning Bell to pay off a portion of her debt. Route B, Naomi investigates some mysterious happenings up on this snow-covered mountain. She gains the assistance of a local hiker, David. After following his musky aroma through a snow blind, she stumbles upon a cave/secret research facility where she has to have a trivia off against a supercomputer. After Googling all the answers to this very obscure trivia, Naomi Naomi wins and gains access to the summit of the mountain. Here she comes across a beautiful forest of cherry blossoms and Stonehenge. Here she takes a magic bean out of her pocket and plants it into the middle of Stonehenge, then pisses on it, and it grows a giant beanstalk up to this UFO, which is right up there. Here comes the best line in the game.
And who knows what's waiting ahead? Aliens? Ghosts? Wicker men? Bring it, bitches.
Naomi climbs the beanstalk and then is immediately ambushed by aliens who sick waves and waves of killer chickens at her. This is the highlight of the entire fucking game. Enjoy it while it lasts. After the boss battle, she picks up some glowing moss and then hands it over to Morning Bell to pay off a portion of her debt. Route C, Naomi investigates the origin of the Kurtana, which was the sword that killed Elizabeth. With the assistance of Detective Norlock Homeless and his little bird Watson, she discovers the wealthiest man in Rainy Woods has a history with the sword. This man's name's Rudman, and he fell in love with this woman in the town named Martha, who might be a descendant of King Arthur or some shit. And then he tells you, hey, she might have the sword, so go out and find her. Then you do some good old fart cloud sniffing, you do a puzzle, there's some buildup that looks like you're gonna do a boss fight, but no, this dog comes in and does it for you, and you just grab the sword.
Thou art recognized, hero.
Before throwing the Kurtana into the lake, a piece of it breaks off, and then you give it to Morning Bell to pay off a portion of Naomi's debt. If you haven't picked up on it by now, Naomi is no closer to solving the murder of Elizabeth. We're only about 4 hours into the game's main story, and we're now entering the final stretch. A mad scientist named Nicholas who works for Morning Bell wants to study the people of Rainy Woods and propositions Naomi to kidnap some test subjects from the town in exchange for paying off the rest of her debt. Naomi complies, and then you just go off and talk to 3 different people, and then they just automatically get captured. Using the 3 artifacts Naomi collected in the game, Nick is able to build a ray gun that can transform the citizens of Rainy Woods in and out of their animal forms, without the whole moonlight business getting in the way.
Incredible! Truly incredible!
He explains that he's doing this so he can convince people that there's healing effects to this new ray gun, and that the people of Rainy Woods have been holding out on the secrets to curing various diseases. And then the CEO of Morning Bell shows up and says, hey, look at this graph, we're gonna make a fuck ton of money. All the people of Rainy Woods are understandably pissed off at Naomi for the whole kidnapping thing. Naomi gets second thoughts and then decides to go after Nick and foil his whole plan. There's a press conference in Rainy Woods where Nick is going to expose his experiments and say that the people of Rainy Woods were hiding the cure to cancer or something. So this is the final boss fight. You wait until Nick has his back turned, and then you just walk over and pee on his machine. That's all you get to do. Naomi foiled Nick's plans and she becomes a hero, and now she's able to pay off the rest of her debt in one fell swoop with no input from the player. Did you enjoy the 5-hour debt repayment RPG? But wait, what happened to explaining the whole mystery behind the citizens turning into cats and dogs in the first place? Oh, I guess it can't be solved. Well, wait a second. What about the murder of Elizabeth? Who was the murderer? Why did she die? The answer is no one. She's alive, and she was LARPing as a paraplegic for some reason. Also, she somehow switched places with the CEO of Morning Bell, who was murdered in her stead. And all of the events in the game may or may not have been Naomi's imagination. Guys, I had one shred of hope left for the good life, and Swery just took it from me and my money at the same time. The whole finale of the game is a total joke to say the least. We're 5 hours in and we're no closer to solving any of the game's major mysteries. But now that I think about it, that's so quirky, jank, cool, interesting, weird, quirky, jank. During the Kickstarter campaign, SWERY gave an interview with Weekly Famitsu where he promised that your story choices would dynamically change the identity of the killer. The chronological order of events won't change, but as the player, you'll investigate a group of possible culprit NPCs. This will influence their relationships and behavior. The biggest effect of this is that Elizabeth's killer will be someone unique based on how the game goes. We went from anyone could be the culprit to no culprit at all. Bravo, SWERY. So, who do I think done it? Who's the real murderer in The Good Life? Well, I only have one suspect that comes to mind. SWERY65, and the victims were your time and my money. If there's any lesson that I've learned from all of this, it's that I should have gone with the good rice. Available now! Hey everyone, Hikiko here. Thank you so much for joining me for SWERY Files Episode 4. Took me a very long time to make this and I almost died during the process. If you would, please consider subscribing to my channel or supporting me on Patreon, becoming a channel member, or giving me a refund for The Good Life, SWERY. Anyways, Merry Christmas and I'll see you all next time.